Zeo Genesis is a new tabletop miniatures game that I backed a few months ago over on GameFound, primarily because it's going to be featuring USA-made plastic gaming miniatures. Now I went ahead and put in a pledge for the entire starter set, the physical copy of the starter set, but unbeknown to me, I also got the STL files. Well, at least they dropped into my Mini Factory library a little while ago. That's kind of awkward to say my Mini Factory. But hey, regardless, that's the name of the company. So let's go ahead and take a look at two of the miniatures from this upcoming game. And here are those two miniatures that I was talking about. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, did this game have a whole bunch more than just two miniatures? And the answer is yes. Yes, it did. And the reason why these are the ones here is because with the pre-supported files the game developers put out, I had tons of failures. You can see here, this chunk of the leg is missing. And when it comes to what you see in front of you here, only like the two bodies, the shoulder pad and the head, I think, printed out without failure. Every other piece, I had to go back in and add a whole bunch of more supports to it in order to get the things to print out correctly. And also, in addition to that, I had two other miniatures that I had downloaded and tried to print out. I had added more supports and they kept failing, and eventually the FEP on my Resin 3D printer, well, kind of crapped out. Now I got to replace that, and that's always an annoying process. So just as a note, when it comes to this game, you may have to add a lot more supports to get them to work for your 3D printer. However, the disclaimer, of course, is when it comes to Resin 3D printers, the combination of the printer, print settings, and the type of resin you're using is enough variability there that essentially it makes it impossible for someone to go ahead and create a single pre-supported file that is not superly over-supported that is going to actually work across a wide range of printers and resins. I printed these guys out on my Prusa SL1S with Ministry of Resin opaque gray resin material. And I kind of used the speed settings that were a little bit slower than the absolute fastest that the SL1S can do. So anyway here, one thing I want to point out from a design aspect is you see in the bodies you have these little arm-like appendages because those are actually the arms of the pilots inside. So these are not independent AI robots, they are armored suits. Here's a picture from the comic book that goes along with the game that kind of shows you how the guys actually pilot these things with like the canopy open. Anyway here, one thing I want to point out from a design aspect is you see in the bodies you have these little arm-like appendages because those are actually the arms of the pilots inside. So these are not independent AI robots, they are armored suits. Here's a picture from the comic book that goes along with the game that kind of shows you how the guys actually pilot these things with like the canopy open. And despite these things being armored suits, one thing that really fascinated with this game is giant knives, because I guess knives are great at stabbing into giant robot things, at least in this world anyway. So a lot of guys in this game have knives as melee weapons. Okay, so with that out of the way, let me get the rest of these guys cleaned up, get the support material that's still stuck on there removed, and see what these things look like when they're all assembled. The joy of having a whole bunch more supports to get it to print is that you gotta spend much more time removing the supports post-curing. Now normally I like to try to remove as much of the support material as I can prior to post-curing, like I did with this piece. I got like 98% of it removed, and it just makes this process a lot better. And the end finish is a lot better because when you do that, you don't really have lots of little bumps like you do post-curing. Well, I think that's pretty good for now. Let me get these guys assembled. And there we go. They are together at least as much as my brain remembers them or thinks they look cool, because I didn't follow any instructions if there were any, and I didn't even reference the actual images. I just kind of assembled them how I think they look kind of neat. And one thing to note about these miniatures, I mean, I do think they are pretty darn cool. For comparison's sake, I actually have a couple, there's a new Lizardman from Age of Sigmar, and there's an old Temple Guard. Give you an idea of how big these are. These are the larger miniatures in the set. There are human-sized troopers, like I said, that I had problems printing off that we'll probably see at some point. But these are some of the larger miniatures that are available in the range. There may be two others that I don't have because they weren't part of this core set that are a little bit bigger than this guy, I think. They're like 110 millimeters tall, so it's probably a little bit bigger than this. But maybe someday I'll get one of those. We'll see if I actually enjoy playing the game first. Now, how I would describe these particular miniatures is the quality is pretty cool. They look awesome, but they're not crammed with detail. I brought these two guys out here intentionally because, like modern Warhammer miniatures, they're just packed with little bits of detail all over the place. You got the scales in the Lizardmen, you have multi-layers of like armor. If you go back to the Temple Guard, they even have like raised armor things right there. You've got shrunken heads, skulls. You know, Warhammer's known for having 10,000 skulls over miniatures because people like the kind of look of that. And it does look awesome, but it's kind of a pain to paint. So I'll be curious to try these guys out and see how they are when we come to painting, because they are a little bit simpler, but they still look pretty darn awesome. And they have detail where you need detail, a little reactor thing and the mechanical arm bits. It's just that some of the armor panels are kind of big, flat, without a lot of interesting detail going on, but that's perfectly fine. Well, that is just about all I have to say in these miniatures right here. I actually have a few important disclaimers about this figure. Apparently I assembled him backwards, so let me go ahead and just kind of break that apart. And the legs are supposed to face this way, so I'll get around to fixing him later. What threw me off is his feet are essentially backwards then compared to how battle mechs normally are, and that probably messed with something in my head. He's really supposed to look more or less like that. I still think that's kind of odd, but okay, that's how the figure's supposed to be designed. Also, I got the shoulder pads in the completely wrong spot. They should be backwards as well. That's what I get for trying to do things from memory. Anyway, there are a few little happy endings to the story though. First, I did get the FEP replaced on my 3D printer, and it is working again quite well. It was an annoying process because it always is, and it was even worse because several of the screws were stripped, making things much more fun. As a result, I probably won't be printing any more of these STL files out. I don't feel like dealing with the failed prints. I'm going to go ahead and wait till the final miniatures show up with the box set, which was scheduled at the end of the year, around December or so. We'll see if that's still going to actually work out. Usually with these projects, they end up getting delayed quite a bit. It will be cool to actually compare the final plastic injection molded ones to 3D prints. That's not something I normally get to do with gaming miniatures, and it'll be interesting to see the quality differences between, the professionally manufactured ones and what our 3D printers can actually go ahead and do. And the other happy ending kind of related to this, because I was using a Prusa printer, is that Prusa is now assembling some of their 3D printers here in the United States. The manufacturing of the components is still being done elsewhere, but final assembly is being done in a factory in this country. So if you're ordering one of, I believe, the Core 1 or the Mark IV here in the United States, you're going to get one that has been assembled locally here and some factory somewhere. But that is about all I have for you guys to say. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and if you're into 3D printable tabletop gaming things, head over to fracturedcolony.com to check out my line of 3D printable gaming miniatures. This guy right here is from a recent crowdfunding project, and once it gets fulfilled, it'll be available on that website for sale. Even then, all these miniatures right now are designed for FFF 3D printers. I might try a few designs that are more tailored towards resin in the not too distant future. So with that, thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.